What's up, Taiwan? I'm Eric Gao, and thanks for joining us for the news. Taiwan's military is facing a personnel crisis, with reports showing a steep increase in the number of officers who are choosing to leave service early. Reese Ayers is live outside the Defense Ministry in the capital with more on this. Reese, just how many of these officers are leaving and why?
Well, Eric, the number of officers leaving service early has actually quadrupled in the last 4 years. It went from about 400 in 2020 to almost 1,600 last year. And that's despite the fact that actually when officers leave service early, they have to pay a penalty fee. And there are even some reports of officers injuring themselves to get discharged early, and that's not the only issue facing the ministry at the moment. The total number of volunteers and military personnel currently around 166,000. That's also decreased by about 3% in the last year alone, and that's a trend that looks set to continue. Now, as for the reasons for this crisis, the Defense Ministry are pointing to several issues. One is that there's just generally more competition to attract young talent in Taiwan in other industries, and also pointing to the fact that Taiwan just generally has a population issue with a declining birth rate. There's just generally a smaller pool of people to pull from, and people just generally seem a bit less interested in a career in the military these days.
So Reese, what's the Defense Ministry doing to tackle this decline in personnel?
Well, they've acknowledged that there's an issue, and they've highlighted three potential focus points. One is to reduce the number of people who leave service early. The second, increase retainment figures. So that means keeping more personnel on for longer. And third, improving recruitment efforts around the country. Now, we don't have any more specific details yet about what that three-point plan might look like, but I spoke to a security analyst earlier today who said that Taiwan may consider increasing salaries and other job benefits like annual leave for personnel. But he also pointed out to the need for Taiwan to make careers in the military look more attractive, pointing to how the US advertises military jobs as being, full of purpose and a career path with a future. Now, the dangers of having an understaffed military pose certain risks for Taiwan, obviously. Taiwan has a huge number of orders of military equipment still coming from the States, but without the muscle to operate that equipment, Taiwan will be left vulnerable, and Taiwan's firepower and ability to defend itself will naturally be impacted.
Thanks, Reese. That was Reese Ayers reporting from outside Taiwan's Defense Ministry in Taipei. Meanwhile, Taiwan says that China is trying to recruit Taiwanese spies to carry out armed insurrection and even possibly form sniper teams in the event of a Chinese invasion. Now, that's according to a report published by Taiwan's National Security Bureau. Louise Watt is following this story for us, and she joins us live from Taipei. Louise, this report makes for some pretty grim reading. What more can you tell us?
Eric, this report gives us some indication of the extent of the challenge Taiwan is facing when it comes to Chinese espionage. The report details the numbers of prosecutions relating to Chinese spying in recent years. Back in 2021, there were 16 cases. That went down a bit the following year, and then in 2023 it jumped to 48, and just last year there were 64 prosecutions. Now, worryingly for Taiwan, as China seeks to get its hands on its defense intel, most of those 64 cases involved serving members of the military, 28 cases. And 15 cases involved former members of the military. So it seems that the main target for Chinese spying recruitment is active and former members of the military. And Chinese spies are frequently trying, according to the report, to use retired service personnel to recruit acting service personnel. They offer incentives such as cash and they target people with heavy debt, for example. Now, it's not just military who are being targeted here. It's government agencies, it's local temples, religious groups, and criminal gangs. And one of the more notable parts of the report is about what China would try to get its spy networks in Taiwan to do if it invaded Taiwan. The National Security Bureau says it's found evidence that gangs recruited as spies were told to raise Chinese flags and mount armed insurrection in the case of an invasion. And the report also says that China is trying to recruit spies to form sniper teams to come up with sniper missions targeting military installations and also foreign institutions based in Taiwan. Now, China's doing this, of course, to gain defense intel, but not just because of that, also to lower the morale of the Taiwanese people. Now, to counter this, the National Security Bureau says it's working more closely with investigative and military agencies to try and root out Chinese espionage. And just last week, it was brought to light that prosecutors have a case against 7 suspects, again, mostly retired military officers, and they're alleged to have been recruited to send photos and GPS coordinates to China of military installations in Taiwan, as well as the de facto US embassy here.
Thanks, Louise. That was Louise Watt reporting from Taipei. At least 24 people are now confirmed dead in the devastating wildfires in Southern California. Those blazes have engulfed entire communities in the greater Los Angeles area, destroying more than 12,000 buildings. Now, most schools and offices are set to reopen, but a fire warning remains in effect until at least Wednesday. The dry Santa Ana winds are expected to strengthen, with gusts reaching over 100 kilometers per hour. Firefighters are still struggling to contain the flames. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says he is ready to exchange captured North Korean troops for Ukrainian soldiers who are being held in Russia. 2 Korean soldiers are in custody in Kyiv, with new footage translated and provided by Ukraine's presidential office showing part of an interrogation. The soldiers were asked if they know about the ongoing conflict.
Не знає. Ви перебуваєте в Україні. Ви знали, що ви воюєте проти України?
우크라이나 상대로 싸우는 거 알고 있었지. 몰랐어?
Не знав. А що вам казали ваші командири, коли відправляли на війну?
훈련을 실전처럼 해본다고 했어요.
Йому казали, що просто тренування.
U.S. and Ukrainian intelligence officials say that there are roughly 11,000 North Korean troops deployed in Russia's Kursk regions. It's believed that North Korea is sending troops in exchange for military tech that Pyongyang could use for its own weapons program. China recorded nearly $6 trillion in overall trade last year, marking a record high for the world's second largest economy.
根据世界贸易组织公布的最新的数据截止到去年的前3季度，我国进口增速高于全球1个百分点，预计全年继续保持第2大进口国的地位。
Customs officials reported total imports and exports have grown 5% year on year, and that Beijing's so-called circle of friends in foreign trade continues to expand. Exports were a main driver of China's growth, particularly electric vehicles, batteries, and solar panels. China's economy has been struggling to bounce back from a property market crisis, weak consumption, and rising government debt. So China's latest figures are also the last batch of trade data before U.S. President-elect Donald Trump takes office. He has pledged to slap sweeping tariffs on trade partners, including China, a move that economists have warned could harm global trade. For more on this, Joyce Zun spoke to Asia-Pacific economist Alicia Garcia Herrero.
China has posted record high trade figures, but this comes at a time of a weakening yuan or RMB. How are you making sense of the state of China's economy?
Well, it is a record, but especially for exports. Imports have barely grown. The reason is quite simple. The RMB is weak, and because it's weak, imports are too expensive, and exports are being supported by the exchange rate. So that's what we have. Of course, this also means that Trump is watching, and he's going to come and see all of these numbers with a big trade surplus for China, and she's not going to like it. So I don't know. They're good numbers for China, but how long can they last is really the key question.
What position does this leave China in with just days until Donald Trump becomes the U.S. president?
Well, frankly speaking, there's two things making it hard for China at the current juncture. One is Trump. I mean, you don't want to have strong exports right before inauguration. Trump is going to watch for economies, and by the way, Taiwan is another one, with big trade surpluses. So you don't want to be on the spotlight at that juncture. But the other one, and that is unrelated to Trump, at least so far, it's the very, very strong U.S. economy. Investors want to jump to the dollar. So for the RMB, this is a problem. So it is not only Trump, it's about this very strong economy in the U.S., to be very frank. And that means the Fed will not cut. That means why not just put your money, if it's not already there, in dollar rather than keep it in RMB. It's pretty hard for any currency in which is not the dollar, to be frank.
That was Elisa Garcia Herrero, the chief economist at Natixis, on China's economy. Crowds of beginners joined a two-day Jiu-Jitsu tournament in Taipei over the weekend, proof of the growing popularity of this sport here in Taiwan. Among them was a local influencer who was known for his rough approach, trying his hand at the gentle art. Bryn Thomas was there.
At an annual Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournament in Taipei, crowds of white belts stepped onto the mats for the first time, risking their necks and their joints in a full-contact grappling sport that's rapidly growing in popularity here in Taiwan. Among the beginners was Holger Chen, a controversial but massively popular local influencer who goes by the handle Guanzhong, the gym boss.
我已经45岁，但是我今天报的是成年组，是年轻人，20几岁的。我是要试着跟全台湾人说，其实，柔术这个东西很好，希望大家都可以来参加这样子。
The tourney, Chen's first in Taiwan, adds to his growing martial arts background and is another step in his eventful life story. Chen hails from a low-income, single-parent family. Before turning his hand to martial arts, he was a member of the Marines and also a one-time gangster. His appearance leads to frequent comparisons with U.S. podcaster Joe Rogan, and he's about as controversial, never afraid to offer his opinion.
所以我是觉得说，台湾真的要加油。台湾不是没有钱，台湾就是要培养军人，给军人很好的待遇。再来是我们的武器也要跟上，再来是台湾人本身也要过得好啦。如果台湾人连生活都有问题，他们也没有能力，他们管他谁统治他。
While Chen is a big celebrity, at this tournament he's just another competitor. And most of the weekend's tournament attendees weren't there to discuss politics. They came to cut their teeth or support a loved one trying their hand at a new sport.
现在慢慢的，很多人已经开始知道这些运动，然后尤其是他们本身没有在做这个运动，但他知道，所以我觉得真的进步很多。
Many senior members of Taiwan's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu community say that while having influencers try the sport is a great way to attract new members, their effect will be short-lived if they don't commit to training long-term.
Influencers, people who have a little bit bigger name, doing something outside of Jiu-Jitsu, now trying Jiu-Jitsu, recognizing it's one of the best self-defense sports, then getting into that helps spread the word as well. Yeah. So if these people who have a little bit of clout and popularity and are a little famous, as long as they stick with it, then that'll help to grow it. If they just come in for a little bit, it'll be a flash pan, everybody will die out.
Dimitri says the popularity of jiu-jitsu has grown exponentially since he arrived in Taiwan back in 2005. Back then, the only academy in the country was Taiwan Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which opened in 2003. Today, there's over 10 in Taipei alone. Now, with popular influencers like Holger Chen joining in, the sport is gaining more exposure and introducing more people to the joys of grappling. Hank Xu and Bryn Thomas for TaiwanPlus.
And thanks for tuning in today for What's Up Taiwan. Before we go, check out this Elvis Presley themed parade from the annual Parks Elvis Festival in Australia. I'm Eric Gao. Thank you very much.